Jennifer's first trip to London. Jennifer was 20 years old. She had never travelled alone before. She lived with her family in a small town. Every day was the same. But she always dreamed of visiting London. She wanted to see the famous places and walk on busy streets. One day she bought a ticket. She packed her bag and felt excited. But she was also a little nervous. The day of the trip arrived. Jennifer woke up early. She checked her bag again. Passport, phone, money. Everything was there. She ate a small breakfast, but she was not hungry. Her hands felt cold and her heart beat fast. She took a deep breath and left for the airport. The taxi ride was long. She looked out the window. People hurried to work. The streets were busy. At the airport, everything was big. There were so many people. Some pulled heavy suitcases, others talked on phones. Jennifer followed the signs and found her gate. She showed her passport and ticket. The airport staff smiled and let her pass. She sat down and waited. She held her ticket tightly. This was really happening. When the announcement came, Jennifer stood up. It was time to board the plane. She walked slowly with the other passengers. The airplane was huge. Jennifer sat by the window. She fastened her seatbelt and waited. The plane started to move. It went faster and faster. Then, suddenly, it lifted into the sky. She looked outside. The city below became smaller and smaller. Then everything disappeared behind the clouds. Jennifer tried to relax. She listened to music and looked at the flight map. London was still far away. The flight attendant brought food. Jennifer ate slowly. She was not very hungry. She thought about London. What would it be like? Would she get lost? Would people be friendly? After many hours, the pilot spoke. "We will land soon." Jennifer's heart beat fast. She looked outside. The lights of London sparkled in the night. She took a deep breath. A new adventure was about to begin. The plane landed smoothly. Jennifer felt a little nervous. She took a deep breath and waited for her turn to leave. People stood up quickly, took their bags and moved toward the exit. Jennifer followed them slowly. The airport in London was huge. The ceilings were high and the lights were bright. There were so many signs, but she did not understand all of them. She held her passport tightly and walked toward passport control. A long line of people waited in front of her. Some talked, some looked at their phones, and others looked tired. Jennifer felt small in the crowd. When it was her turn, she gave her passport to the officer. He looked at it, then looked at her. He asked a few questions. His voice was clear, but his accent was different. Jennifer answered carefully. The officer nodded and stamped her passport. She was now in London. She followed the signs to baggage claim. Many suitcases moved on a long belt. Jennifer waited and watched. After a few minutes, she saw her bag. She pulled it off the belt and held it tightly. Now she had to find the train to the city. She looked around. There were so many people, and everything felt big and confusing. She followed the signs for the train station. Jennifer found the ticket machine. There were many buttons and options. She felt nervous. A man stood behind her, waiting. She did not want to take too long. She looked at the map on the screen. Finally, she found the right ticket and paid for it. The machine printed a small card. She picked it up and walked to the platform. The train arrived. The doors opened and people moved quickly. Jennifer stepped inside. The train was clean and bright. She found a seat near the window. The train started moving. Jennifer looked outside. The city was dark, but the streets were full of lights. Cars moved fast, and people walked on the sidewalks. London was alive, even at night. Jennifer felt tired but excited. She checked the map again. Her stop was still far. She leaned back and took a deep breath. This was her first night in London. A new adventure had begun. The train moved fast through the city. Jennifer watched through the window. The lights of London shone brightly. Tall buildings, busy streets, and red buses passed by. Everything looked different from her small town. She felt excited, but also a little lost. She checked the map again. Her stop was coming soon. She held her suitcase tightly and waited. When the train stopped, Jennifer stood up. People moved quickly to the doors. She followed them. The station was big and busy. Many people walked fast. Some talked on their phones, and others carried heavy bags. Jennifer looked for the exit sign. She followed the arrows and climbed the stairs. When she stepped outside, cold air touched her face. She was finally in London. The streets were full of people. Cars and buses moved fast. The buildings were tall, with bright lights and big windows. She took a deep breath and smiled. This was the city she had always dreamed about. But now she had to find her hotel. Jennifer took out her phone and checked the address. She followed the map, walking slowly. The sidewalks were crowded. People walked in different directions. Some talked, some laughed, and some looked tired. She passed by small shops and big stores. The city was alive. After walking for some time, she reached her hotel. It was a small building with a bright sign. She entered and walked to the front desk. A woman stood there, smiling. Jennifer gave her name and showed her passport. The woman typed on the computer, then handed Jennifer a small key. "Room 204, she said. Jennifer thanked her and took the key. She carried her suitcase up the stairs. The hallway was quiet. She found her room and opened the door. Inside there was a small bed, a desk and a window. She placed her suitcase on the floor and sat on the bed. She felt tired but happy. She had arrived in London. Tomorrow her adventure would begin. Jennifer woke up early. Sunlight came through the window. She stretched her arms and sat up. It was her first morning in London. She felt excited. She quickly got ready, put on her jacket, and grabbed her phone. Today she would explore the city. She stepped outside the hotel. The air was cool and fresh. The streets were already busy. People walked fast, some holding coffee cups, others looking at their phones. Jennifer checked her map. Her first stop was a famous landmark, Big Ben. She followed the directions and started walking. As she walked, she saw red buses and black taxis moving through the streets. The buildings were tall and beautiful. Some were old with big windows, others were modern with glass walls. She passed small shops selling souvenirs. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. She felt happy. After a long walk, she reached Big Ben. The tall clock tower stood against the blue sky. It was bigger than she had imagined. She stopped and took a picture. Many tourists stood nearby, taking photos and talking. She listened to their voices. Some spoke English, others spoke different languages. London was full of people from all over the world. Jennifer continued walking. She crossed a bridge over the River Thames. The water sparkled under the sun. Boats moved slowly, carrying passengers. She stopped to watch. Everything felt new and exciting. She took a deep breath and smiled. Her next stop was a small cafe. She ordered a cup of tea and a sandwich. The cafe was warm and cozy. She sat near the window and watched people outside. Some walked in groups, others sat on benches, enjoying the day. She took a sip of her tea. It tasted different from the tea at home, but she liked it. Jennifer looked at her phone. There were still many places to see. She finished her tea, picked up her bag and stepped outside. Her adventure in London had just begun. Jennifer left the cafe and continued walking. The streets were full of life. Musicians played songs on the sidewalk. Artists painted pictures of the city. Small food stalls sold warm snacks. She could smell fresh bread and roasted coffee. Everything felt exciting and new. She followed the map to her next destination, Buckingham Palace. The walk was long, but she enjoyed every step. The city was busy, but she didn't feel lost. She passed beautiful parks with green trees and colourful flowers. People sat on benches, reading books or feeding birds. Some walked their dogs. London felt both big and welcoming. When she reached Buckingham Palace, she saw a large crowd. Tourists stood in front of the big gates, taking pictures. The palace was huge and elegant. The golden details on the gates shone in the sunlight. She watched the guards in red uniforms. They stood still, not moving at all. It was amazing to see. Jennifer took some pictures and then sat on a bench nearby. She looked around. People from different countries were here, just like her. Some spoke in loud voices, others whispered. Some children ran around, laughing. She felt connected to the world in a new way. After some time, she checked her map again. She wanted to visit a museum. London had many famous museums, and most of them were free. She chose one nearby and started walking. The streets were lined with shops and cafes. She saw a bookstore and stopped for a moment. She loved books. She walked inside and looked around. The shelves were full of books, old and new. The smell of paper and ink was comforting. She picked up a small travel book about London and decided to buy it. Finally, she reached the museum. The building was old and beautiful. Inside, everything was quiet. She saw paintings, sculptures, and ancient objects. She walked slowly, reading the signs and learning new things. Time passed quickly. When she left the museum, the sun was setting. The sky turned orange and pink. London looked even more magical. Jennifer felt happy. She had seen so much in one day, but she knew there was still more to explore. Tomorrow would bring another adventure. The next morning, Jennifer woke up feeling excited. She had one more day to explore London. She got ready quickly and stepped outside. The city was waking up. Shops opened their doors and people hurried to work. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Jennifer decided to start her day with breakfast at a small bakery. She walked inside and looked at the display. There were fresh pastries, warm bread and cakes. She ordered a croissant and a cup of tea. She sat by the window and watched people outside. A man read a newspaper. A woman walked her dog. A group of tourists checked their maps. London felt alive, even in the early morning. After breakfast, Jennifer checked her list. She wanted to visit Tower Bridge. She took the underground train, known as the Tube. The station was busy, but she followed the signs. She got on the train and found a seat. The train moved fast through the tunnels. Soon she arrived at her stop. When she stepped outside, she saw the famous Tower Bridge. It was huge and beautiful. The blue and white colours stood against the sky. She walked closer and watched the boats pass under it. She took pictures and enjoyed the view. London was full of history, and she loved every moment. Jennifer then walked along the river. Street performers played music. Artists sold paintings of London. She bought a small postcard to keep as a memory. She continued walking and reached a market. The smell of food filled the air. There were fresh fruits, baked goods and hot meals. She tried some traditional British food and loved it. The day passed quickly. Jennifer visited more places, took more pictures, and enjoyed every moment. But soon it was time to return to her hotel. She packed her bag and sat on the bed. She thought about everything she had seen and done. London was more amazing than she had imagined. The next morning she took a taxi to the airport. She looked out the window, watching the city pass by one last time. She felt proud of herself. She had travelled alone, explored a new place, and learned so much. This was a trip she would never forget. As the plane took off, Jennifer smiled. She knew this was just the beginning. There were many more adventures waiting for her in the world.